To that end, as I was preaching last week, preparing to preach, I was talking about the call of Moses. And in that call, I began to receive what I want to characterize as a Holy Spirit moment, where I felt God speaking to me, and I got kind of in a rant about it when I told it to my wife, and so we decided I wouldn't bring it up until I had cooled down a little bit. I want to talk about several things here. I want to talk about white fragility. I want to talk about our call upon us, because one of the things that struck me that I felt God telling me as your pastor was, Sonny, I'm not asking these people like I did Abraham to pack up all their worldly possessions and go to a place that I will show them, and they are to find their promised land there. That took a lot of faith to move in that direction. Well, I'm not asking Bascomb to do that. God spoke, or in my opinion, I was hearing from God. God did not say, I'm going to ask you to move out of your home and go to a place that is low economic, that's diverse in its community, and I want you to live among those people, and I want you to share your resources openly with them. Although that could happen to some of us, that's not what I felt God was saying in my sermon. But I did feel like God was saying, but Sonny, you did ask them to sort of tune in and not buy the book, not read the book, but listen to you talk about the book, just so we could hear from a different perspective. And several of you immediately wanted to become, I guess, the pastor in your situation and come back at me with things. And I get that in the sense that we need to hear other voices, but not right now. Right now, I wanted you to listen to this one voice and think of it and deal with it critically. And so I did find myself in a profound struggle of disappointment last week, thinking about the people who told me, oh no, I don't like that person, or I don't agree with that person, therefore, I'm not going to listen. And that's when I felt God saying, I asked so little of church people in suburban churches to make a difference, to do things, and all I was asking was for you to listen and think about it and critically examine it. For instance, I was listening to one of my commentators criticize this book by saying the takeaway they had from the book was that we are all racist, or we're racist and don't know we are. Good criticism of this book, a way to constructively deal with it. My wife was reading an article from The Atlantic this morning, and she was coming at me with it about white fragility and the left, the cancel culture of the left, and critically saying that professors and conservatives and others feel like there's such an outrage from the left who think of themselves as woke, and they get up on their liberal high horse, their virtuous or righteous position of self-righteous, where they know more than you do. One professor said that he had gotten together his class and found the LGBTQ people in the class and said, now I'd like us to read this book and I'd like us to deal with this topic. This book includes a anti-gay slur, in a sense, in a satirical way to make a point. How do you guys feel about this? Guys and gals feel about this? And they all said, oh yeah, I think we can learn a lot by dealing with this context. So he started the topic with the class, and the woke white girls in the class, single white women in the class, became outraged at the use of this book. And he's like, they rather than the LGBTQ community, they're going to tell me where I am insensitive about this topic because they are more woke or more virtuous. They see and hear and read properly. So we've got it coming at us from both sides. Those of us that are trying to sit in the middle and hear from both sides have a hard time hearing over the yelling, over the anger, over the self-righteousness that people put into this. So again, I speak to you from what I believe is an unction of the Holy Spirit. Be a critical thinker and be willing to listen and listen to both sides. I'm going to try to do that. I'm going to try to look at this critically, and I'm going to try to also look at the arguments from the other side critically. Not everybody swallows this hook, line, and sinker, including me. So it's one of the things that I would like to think my congregation and me as the pastor of the congregation could engage us in without us fleeing to the hills or calling me something that I don't think I deserve. As we move through those processes, it's the only way for us to move forward. Again, for us to be part of the solution rather than part of the problem. Are you part of the problem? Are you the very ones that we're talking to when we talk to the right or the left about their intransigence, about their unwillingness to have a dialogue, to listen to each other? How can we ever find that broad middle ground unless that happens? So let's pray about that a lot as we move forward. Again, she is talking in chapter 9 here about white fragility in action. She said, when I was a professor of education, my university was situated 10 miles from a city that is roughly 56% Black and Latinx. Our student population was 97% white, and many of them did their internships in the public schools in this city. So they had a different culture that they were walking into. My department hadn't hired a faculty member of color in 17 years. I repeatedly brought this up as an issue. And by the way, this reminded me that the Atlantic article also spoke about the fact that not all of the discrepancies in economics, in housing, in health, in culture between the Black Lives Matter community and white community. And it's easy, again, you paint with a broad brush and you start making stereotypes out of everybody. But not all of those conditions have to do with us, with white racism, or our supreme society where whites rule supreme, in the sense that she's giving us this idea of this. But that's not our issue to deal with. We will have to pray that black leaders, like the new pastor, the pastor at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, running for office now, are those leaders, I can't think of his name now. He's the leader of, he runs the new Daily Show, Trevor Noah, and some of the other personalities, Camus Bell. They are people who are trying to speak to all sides, and maybe they will get to the point where they can talk to their culture and their society. Why do people burn buildings down, burn their own communities? Why do they loot their own shops in their own communities and think that crime is protest when we know it's not? You know, we're both of our Democrat and Republican sides are saying that that kind of behavior will not be considered protesting and will not be tolerated. So as we get into this, we're going to have to pray up the leaders of those communities that can speak to that. But as a white man, especially an old white man, I can't speak to that. I have to pray they will speak to it. I can speak to a white constituency, but I don't think they want to listen. That's the point. And I think this author is a white woman who is trying to speak as well with this. So she's trying to work with this school and with these teachers who are going into these. And it said, I repeatedly brought up that there weren't a faculty member of color in this school. We're only 57 miles from, 10 miles, sorry, from a city that is very diverse, and we're sending teachers in there, but we don't have any faculty members of color. Eventually, a white colleague came to my office and angrily told me, you know, every time you bring this up, you are saying that we shouldn't have our jobs. White fragility. This fear complex. I received a call from an all-white organization that's interested in racial equity training. They want to know how I will ensure the participants will feel comfortable in this process. You won't. You won't feel comfortable. Don't be so fragile, she's saying. Okay. So it says at no point does she acknowledge that any aspect of the talk that relates to her as a white person share any insight into what she might have gained from her own whiteness, and consider the impact of berating a woman of color in my organization she was talking about that didn't actually give the talk. Because one of the women in there, one of these woke white women, they call them Karens right now is the ongoing term, one of the Karens got all upset because they didn't talk about Native Americans. And so she was berating one of the staff of the talk, who didn't even give the talk, about that kind of thing. We call that deflecting in a sense. How dare you suggest, we say, that I could have said or done something racist? Of course we do it. We do it all the time. We have to be willing to understand that that's the culture in the world, in the water that we swim in. White people are receptive to my presentation as long as it remains abstract, she says. But then the Karens, the Sharons, they defensively explain if they are challenged or if they are brought to trying to bring some light into their way of approaching things, that they were misunderstood. And then they angrily withdraw, and others run in to defend her by re-explaining what she really meant. And the whole time that this situation was going on, the person of color in the room that felt talked down to or had an issue with the situation, his name was Jason, his concerns were never stated. It was all about the white people feeling uncomfortable. She even had a German lady who said that she didn't grow up around any black people, therefore she had no issues about that. And the teacher, the presenter here, the author, tried to get her to understand, oh no, you've had issues, you've seen television, you've had American and other movies and television come in. How did that affect you? See, growing up in Germany would not preclude her from absorbing problematic racial images about black people. That's her take on this. So she said, I did not tell Eva she was a racist or that her story was racist. What I did do was challenge her self-image as someone who was exempt from racism. Interesting. So to wrap this up quickly, I'm just going to say, here are the common emotional reactions that white fragility presents, white people have. They feel singled out, insulted, attacked, judged, silenced, angry, shamed, scared, guilty, outraged, accused. All right? When we have these feelings, it's common to behave in the following ways: crying, denying, physically leaving, focusing on intentions. I didn't intend that. Emotionally withdrawing, seeking absolution, arguing, avoiding. Again, what she's saying here is that no growth happens, nothing changes. We don't really learn if we take this white fragility approach. I already know all of this. I know people of color. The real oppression is class or any other racial, any other diversion, any gender or anything other than race. I marched in the 60s. I already know all this. You're judging me. You're elitist. You don't know me. I just said one little innocent thing. You're generalizing. That's just your opinion. Some people find offense where there is none. I disagree. You don't do this the right way. You misunderstand me. You're playing the race card. I don't feel safe. It's not welcoming to me. The problem is your tone. You're being racist against me. I can't say anything right. You're making me feel guilty. It was not my intention. You hurt my feelings. I've suffered too. Many of these things are legitimate issues, but it's not moving us forward. It's not getting to the core of what we can do to make things better. It's just taking offense ourselves and moving over into our corner. One person said, I don't want to talk about race anymore. I want to talk about gender, because she was female and she knew she would be the oppressed minority in that situation. So we have these assumptions that we live with. Racism is simply personal prejudice. I'm free of racism. I'll be the judge of whether racism has occurred. You can't, not from your position. Racism can only be intentional. It can't be unintentional. You're just misconstruing my intentions. My suffering relieves me of racism or racial privilege, just because I had to work hard for what I earned. I understand. White people who experience another form of oppression, for whatever reason, classism or whatever else, we can't experience racial privilege. I'm a good person. I can't be racist. I'm entitled to remain comfortable and have this conversation the way I want it to play out. And she just goes on with more and more. I have friends of color. There's no problem. Society is fine the way it is. Well, from your perspective, yeah. The worldview is objective, and I'm the only one operating from an objective worldview. Really? I don't think that's true of anybody. If I can't see it, it's not legitimate. Well, that's what we're trying to do, is open up our eyes and try to see other perspectives. You think you're better than me. Again, there are going to be people who are going to come off that way or approach it that way. I'm smarter than you, or more woke than you. I've got a better view of society, or I'm doing this better than you are doing this. All right. And then the functions of white fragility, these are the things that are not going to change. We maintain white solidarity, close off self-reflection, to grow it all, to change it all, silence the discussion, make white people the victims, hijack the conversation so it becomes all about me, all about us, protect a limited worldview, take race off the table, protect white privilege, focus on the messenger, not the message, rally more resources to white people. So these are the behaviors and assumptions undergirding them. And they do not present the claimant as racially open, willing to learn, willing to grow. It's quite the opposite. They block it. They prevent it. They will not let it happen to move forward. And so that's the way I feel sometimes when I engage with folks who say, I don't like this author, I don't like this approach, I don't like what this person says. Fine. But it still doesn't relinquish you as a Christian from the responsibility of listening, of learning, of growing. Just like we should also listen to people who are approaching it from the other side. And I pray we will. I'm just convicted that this side is not being heard in white suburbia, where I live. That was the concern.